From High Definition News, I'm Jeff Kaufman with some catch-up for your Tuesday lunch. This is some of what's been breaking in the past few hours. Long Beach police are confirming that one suspect was shot and killed at the end of a very high-speed pursuit just before the height of rush hour this morning. Another person was taken into custody. He surrendered after the shooting and was not hurt. This all began around 6 a.m. in the LBC when officers responded to a report of a stolen car. They caught up with the two suspects, who led officers along surface streets through Long Beach, Downey, and Bellflower. The driver of the stolen car lead-footed it at 70 miles an hour on Lakewood Boulevard and Imperial Highway. He blew through red lights and stop signs, narrowly missing a motorcyclist and several cars. He took it up to 90 miles an hour on the 105, 605, and 91 freeways, then dropped back down to surface streets. He turned onto Foster Road in Bellflower, not realizing it was a cul-de-sac. A half dozen black and whites had him blocked in, but when he tried to make an end run around the cop cars, the officers opened fire. The driver of the car was killed, and after a moment, the passenger crawled over the driver and climbed out of the driver's side window with his hands up. He is in custody. Police also say they have recovered a weapon that one of the suspects threw out the car window during the chase. The scene is still yellow taped off and will be for some hours. One suspect dead in an officer-involved shooting and another under arrest. No traffic accidents and no civilians hurt. Considering how reckless the stolen car driver was during the chase, a much lower casualty toll than it could have been. You may remember the officer-involved shooting in Charlotte, North Carolina last September. Police there confronted a man named Keith Lamont Scott, who was sitting in a van parked outside his apartment with what officers said was marijuana and a weapon. His wife came out of the apartment with her cell phone video camera rolling.
Don't shoot him. He didn't do anything.
Drop the gun! Drop the gun!
He doesn't have a gun. He has a TBI. He's not going to do anything to you guys. He just took his medicine.
Drop the gun!
You heard Scott's wife, Rakia Scott, say her husband had a TBI, that's traumatic brain injury. A few seconds later,
Keith, get out the car. Keith, don't you do it. Don't you do it. Keith, don't you do it. Did you shoot him? Did you shoot him? He better not be dead.
Scott was pronounced dead at the scene. Several days of violent protests rocked Charlotte after the shooting. The governor declared a state of emergency. At the time, the county district attorney said the shooting was legally justified, and the officer who shot Scott would not be prosecuted. But a police review board also looked into the shooting, and now we know its findings. That the shooting of Keith Lamont Scott was within police policy because Scott got out of the van with a gun in his hand and did not follow orders to put it down. Scott's family is still planning to file a complaint with the city, which is a required step before the lawsuit. After passenger David Dow was dragged kicking and screaming off a United Airlines jetliner a couple of weeks ago in Chicago, the 4 airport police officers involved were placed on administrative leave. Today, we're hearing their side of the story. Their report says Dow was combative and resisted being escorted off the plane. He suffered a broken nose, 2 broken teeth, a concussion, and a sinus injury. The police report says those injuries are Dow's own fault, caused by him flailing his arms. The injuries Wells Fargo Bank has suffered in the past year were definitely self-inflicted. You remember the scandal in which bank employees opened hundreds of thousands of fake accounts in the names of real Wells Fargo customers. They used money from customers' real accounts to pay charges and fees for the fake accounts, and most customers never realized what was happening. Wells Fargo at first tried to blame the whole thing on low-level workers, what the bank's CEO John Stumpf called a few bad apples. But employees said they felt pressured by the bank's managers to fulfill unrealistic sales quotas, and that managers looked the other way when the fraudulent accounts showed up on the books. CEO Stumpf eventually resigned with a multi-million-dollar golden parachute. Today, Wells Fargo stockholders vote on a resolution by a shareholder advisory company to remove most of Wells Fargo's board of directors. The vote is non-binding, but if the yes vote is high, the bank will be under a lot of pressure to 86 those directors. Those non-binding shareholder votes do sometimes turn out to be surprisingly binding, like in the case of Walt Disney Company chairman Michael Eisner, who was one of Hollywood's most powerful CEOs until accusations of mismanagement and a revolt led by Walt Disney's nephew led to a 2004 stockholder vote in which 43% voted against Eisner, and he was shown the exit, and he did not get his hand rubber-stamped. Last time the Writers Guild of America called a strike in 2007, movie and TV production shut down for months. A lot of people in the journalism entertainment industrial complex were laid off, and in the end, the producers and writers settled, agreeing to a contract that looked a lot like the one that had just ended. It's contract time again now for the writers, and today the WGA and producers sit down at the negotiating table. Just ahead of that, union members voted yesterday to authorize the union to call a strike if bargaining breaks down. The yes vote was 96%. Just ahead of Friday's deadline for Congress to pass a bill that funds the government, the White House has blinked on the border wall. President Trump has been insisting that Congress authorize money to begin building it ahead of what the president says will be Mexico's eventual reimbursement. If the White House and Congress could not agree, and a bill was not passed and signed by Friday at midnight, the federal government would shut down. Now the White House says it will not insist that funds for the border wall be in the government funding bill, and congressional leaders say that means Uncle Sam will keep humming into Saturday and beyond. Hey, look who's back. After 3 months of vacation and radio silence to extended cheers,
Thank you, hey!
Barack Obama made his first appearance as former president yesterday at the University of Chicago. He fired off some dad humor.
What's been going on while I've been gone?
And he took questions from students.
In 8th grade, which was your first election, we're told...
Can I just say... I'm old.
Obama never mentioned President Trump, but he did touch on two of his favorite topics. One, participation in civic life, that it's important for everyone, and that does not have to mean running for office. He said even getting involved in the PTA is valuable. And two, the Internet's contribution to Americans' polarization.
It used to be everybody kind of had the same information, and we had different opinions about it, but there was a common baseline of facts, and that the Internet in some ways has accelerated this sense of people having entirely separate conversations.
Hey, look who's back. Bill O'Reilly on his podcast last night, the first weekday since he was fired from Fox News Channel.
I am sad that I'm not on television anymore. I was very surprised how it all turned out. I can't say a lot because there's much stuff going on right now. But I can tell you that I'm very confident the truth will come out.
The podcast is free till the end of the month, then it'll cost you. Hey, gotta make up that paycheck somehow. Hey, look who's back. Megyn Kelly. NBC says her first assignment for the network since jumping from Fox News Channel will be to lead a Sunday night news magazine that'll premiere in June. Sunday night news magazine. Sounds familiar. Isn't there one of those already? She'll also host the third hour of Today. Hey, look who'll be back when he recovers from a bacterial infection doctors call rare and potentially deadly.
Someone saved my life tonight. Someone saved my life tonight.
Elton John contracted that bacterial infection during a concert tour of South America this month. He got violently ill on the return flight from Santiago, Chile late last week and was taken straight to a hospital intensive care unit when his plane landed in London. After 2 days in ICU, he went home Saturday night. Elton is 70. He's canceled all of his concerts in April and May, including a run in Las Vegas. He tweeted that he looks forward to getting back on stage June 3rd for a London concert. Maybe you read it in high school or college, or maybe, like a lot of people, you struggled through the first couple chapters of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance and thought, this book is not about Zen, and I'm not learning a thing about fixing my bike. You know who would have agreed with you on both counts? The man who wrote it, Robert Pearson. He was a practicing Buddhist, and he did ride and fix motorcycles, but that's not really what his book was about. The mostly autobiographical 1974 novel told of a Minnesota-California motorcycle trip with his 11-year-old son. That was interspersed with chapters exploring the transformation of the counterculture in America as the hippie-infused 1960s gave way to the tech-driven 1970s. Pearson also wrote about his own mental breakdown that led to a diagnosis of schizophrenia. He got 121 rejection slips before a publisher bought Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. That editor warned Pearson not to spend the $3,000 advance all in one place because there probably would not be any more checks. There were a lot more checks. Zen sold 1 million copies in its first year and stayed on the bestseller lists for a decade. Reviewers compared the book to Moby Dick as a seminal work of American literature and Pearson to Thoreau as an author. Pretty good for a guy who came home from World War II, got a journalism degree, and taught college writing courses. But Pearson was not comfortable with celebrity. People camped out on his lawn, hoping for a word of wisdom, but Pearson insisted he was nobody's philosopher guru, and he began spending months away from home to escape. He wrote only one more book, which came out in 1991 and sold few copies. He moved to Maine about 30 years ago and stopped giving interviews. We got word yesterday that he died there after a long illness. Robert Pearson, who turned a hard life into a hard read, was 88. Now you know what we know. I'm Jeff Kaufman, High Definition News.